Hello, Mr. Trout here, in week 3 of our online gardening and pollinator project. Our goal is to restore some native prairie habitat, and to help out in that, we're going to ask each student and myself to start at least one flowering plant to feed our native pollinators. We're going to look at that because some of us have started our seeds already, and if you haven't, you can start your seeds this week or next week to join our pollinator habitat project. Well, we're back today and we're going to check on the seeds that we've been taking care of this week. Here in my east window, which gets some light, but not the best light, the seeds have germinated. And germination is what you say when the seed begins to grow. I have 2 sprouts or seedlings in this cup, and I see a nice tall one, and a second smaller one in this cup as well. Good thing I have those saucers. There's plenty of water that's dripped through. Here in my south window, there's a few other kinds of plants growing. Like the cilantro here, that has just sprouted in the last day or two. It's very crowded with plants, and I will have to pull out a few of those as they get bigger to prevent overcrowding. This is sometimes called thinning out the plants. I've got a tomato plant growing here, and this is how their leaves look when they first sprout. And a nice sunflower, 2 of them sprouting in this pot here too. Finally, here in my west window, I have a couple of other potted plants to look at. This real tall one here is a bean plant. I planted a dry black bean from the grocery store, and I've gotten this tall plant already. Here we have a mix of green onions and basil, and I see some tomatoes that have sprouted up too. I think I had tomato seeds in my compost that was part of the potting mix, so those will end up coming out. But there's a cute little basil plant. You can see its rounded leaves. And finally, there's a pot of marigolds I'll bring over for us to see. They were planted by my son Judah. And they're all planted, and you can see they're all leaning a certain way. They're leaning towards the window. Well, that's because they're reaching for the light, and there's a name for that called phototropism. Photo meaning light, and tropism meaning movement. Because of this phototropism, it's often advised that when you're growing plants near a window, you rotate them every few days or every week. And now you can see they're facing away from the window. But as the sun shines, they'll lean back towards, and in a day or two, they'll be straight up and then even leaning back towards the window. So why do we need to restore habitat? Where did the habitat go? Well, over time it was developed into many useful and nice things that we have in our society today. Our cities and neighborhoods are very important, but you can't have a prairie where there's a city or neighborhood. Or can you? Farms are very important too. Without farms, there's no food. But this farm doesn't have prairie habitat around it, could it? Our prairies do a lot of good for our wildlife, but also for us. It's important for us to have prairie ecosystem for the wildlife that lives there, but also for the clean air and water and erosion control that this ecosystem provides. So we're going to attempt to restore some habitat to help out pollinators and other animals, and to help out a little bit with our ecosystem services. This week, I'd like to ask you to choose a prairie animal, maybe this monarch butterfly, or perhaps this American goldfinch. We have a few more options too. The red fox. It looks orange, but it's called the red fox as one of its common names. The bison, also known as the buffalo, king of the American prairie. And prairie dogs. They're in the squirrel family. Pick one of these 5 animals this week and look up a couple of things. First of all, every habitat provides food. What food does your animal eat? What is its diet? This will be on your exit ticket. The other thing I want you to look up is, what's the scientific name? I mentioned common names like buffalo and prairie dog, but every animal has a scientific name as well. See if you can find that also. This yard has been allowed to grow with the idea of being a habitat for animals. Does it have the elements that animals need to be truly a habitat? Does it provide food? Does it provide shelter? Let's take a look and see. One element that provides shelter for a lot of insects and worms and things is just leaving the leaves on the ground. All throughout underneath the leaves, you'll find little invertebrates in the right season. I just saw a potato bug. And you'll see birds digging through the leaves. They're looking for those little animals to eat. Take a look at these seed heads. This is from a plant known as the golden Alexander. Yellow flowers in another month or two. But right now, we have seeds. And these seeds can be food for birds and small mammals that might be living around here. I've also noticed the birds make use of these tall grasses. Yes, they have seeds on the end too, but a lot of times the birds will use them as nest material and bring these bits of grasses and weave them into a nest. Really quite ingenious. I wonder, could you make a nest out of different materials from outside? I dare you to try it out. We'll walk through a little bit more and see if there's some other habitat elements. There are logs and rocks that animals can shelter under. Let's see if anybody's living under here. Oh, look at that, centipedes. That's a pretty good find. I see a worm, part of a worm. Rest of it's underground hiding. Good habitat. More material for building nests and for sheltering under. These large clumps of grass provide good shelter for small animals to climb underneath in wet weather and shelter underneath. And also the seed heads of the purple coneflower. I see a little bird called called goldfinches land on these a lot. And they're trying to get at the seeds too for part of their diet. So can a yard be a habitat? It can. It sure can. It's the nest challenge. Can you build a nest from natural materials you find around the neighborhood? I started with this pile of dead grasses and rushes and flower stems, and this is the nest I was able to create. It is not as good as the birds make it, but I think not too bad for a first timer. Can you make a nest? If you do, I'd love to see a picture.